Meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I saw it in one eye, but I don't know.
Hey, thanks for coming out tonight, everybody. Appreciate you being here. We'll go ahead and start with number one, approve the agenda, make any additions, deletions, or corrections this time. We do have a few changes in the agenda. Under new business, we've got the levy and budget discussion. When we start the visitors of the council, our finance director, Nancy, is actually gonna give a presentation on the budget overview, so everybody gets that information ahead of time. We're gonna also we're gonna split our closed session and have part of the closed session right after old business, and then the remainder of the attorney's report / just moving something around. G, new business number 2017 petition and waivers amended, some in the packet, but there's also an amended copy here with some information that changed since Friday. And then we're removing new business number 2007 construction project. That's removed. And we're adding something that came up here in the last few days under I, Administrator's Report, number 3, Allison Rideout. There's an issue there, so Teresa's got an update on something for us on that. Anybody else have anything?
Under new business, add number 3 for Jason Wilker permit.
Okay.
That's it for me. You're gonna do that.
Dan?
I have nothing.
Good. On the consent agenda, we've had some contact here. Teresa, under conferences, number 2, the Futures Camp one. Can we
Yes.
table that to the next meeting
Yes.
and have more discussion on that then?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll remove, F2, that one, and then we'll
Okay.
talk more about that.
Okay.
Okay, anything else anybody has? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Second, thanks. Doug, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. On to the consent agenda, number 2. Everything's in your packets, all the information was there. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Clay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Lonnie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. On to visitors of council. We're gonna start with Nancy. There she is, okay. She's gonna do a presentation, on the 2017.
Yes, and this is actually fairly brief, and it's, more of a summary of, the levy and the pieces that fit together with that. But know that anytime you have any questions about the budget or the levy or any detail, whether now or throughout the year, please always feel free to come to City Hall and someone will help you with some of that. So, so in September, we had our preliminary levy, and when when council sets the preliminary levy, it, includes a lot of things for consideration. And the general rule is that by the time you get to the final levy, you can reduce that original amount or go down from there, but you can never go up from there. So usually we include some things, and then through the discernment of the city council, working with staff and department heads, it often comes down. So all the notices that everyone got reflected that preliminary levy amount, which was 8.8% or whatever it was. Well, through the work of the mayor and council and like I say, staff, the proposed levy is actually this year for a 0% increase. I'm going to take one of each of these and pass. These are out there. I didn't know we have so many. If anyone else would like any copies of these, please let me know after the meeting. We'd be happy to give you a copy of that as well. So generally speaking, hand in hand with the levy, we have to know what our budget is, because we have to know what our expenditures are going to be for the next year before we can determine what the levy is. And generally, in the state of Minnesota, what we ask for in dollars for our levy, which is tied to our budget, is what we get. From that, a tax rate is determined. Other states set mill rates. Have you heard of that? We don't have mill rates in Minnesota. Our tax rate is kind of a mill rate, but in other states it means that they set the mill rate, and then from that, whatever properties happen to be on the tax rolls or added to are assessed these mill rates. So we have to do it a different way. So considerations for the property tax levy are what are the budgets for the general fund. That also includes the library and the EDA. But we don't pay for everything in the city with the tax levy. We get from the state local government aid, and then we also have fees for services that offset some of that. You know, we charge out at the pool, and we charge for rental of our buildings and things like that. The bulk of the support for the city, though, is the taxes and then the local government aid. Also, depending on what the projects are, our taxes have to cover any debt service related to any street repairs. So, and a lot of that debt lasts for about 15 years, and we think we're to a point where some of it will cycle off and we have new without being dramatically impacted by that. So on the other side of that, we have our enterprise funds, and those are things like our water, sewer, storm, electric, and our liquor store. And we expect those to be self-sustaining and supported entirely by the fees that are assessed or the charges that are assessed. We don't ever want to have to support those through taxes. They should be, like it says, they're self-sustaining. And in addition to that, though, we expect, though, that any earnings that they make are reserved and kept in those funds to help pay for future projects or try and keep rates down. But we know that any of those utility projects are very expensive, so we want to, we need to keep the money in there. On occasion, we transfer funds. We know that the liquor store, we use the funds from the liquor store to help buy things like playground equipment or police cars, or they just gave some money to the new library. So we do have transfers like that. Here's the budget for this year. There's a lot of detail, but it gives you an idea of what the expenditures are. So in the enterprise funds, these are the expenses. The city side, what I'm calling city there, is the levy side of that. And again, as I mentioned, there's some fees related to it. We do receive some transfers. Local government aid for next year is going to be $1,000, and our tax levy is this. So out of the $4 million, half of it is supported by the tax levy. Okay, we had some changes this year, and council is familiar with some of this. We budgeted for a 2.5% wage adjustment. I know that there are union negotiations going on right now, but this is what we budgeted, and we're to the point where, we have to pick something and go ahead with it. It's an election year, so every other year we have an additional amount added to that particular department. So we do have some of that. We have a comprehensive plan that's in the works, and it's not, so we're working on that. And then the Buxton, the marketing initiative that was started by council, was not budgeted for the next year because we're going to wait and see how it goes. It was a year contract, and that carries us into some of 2018. Okay, here's a summary of what the levy increases have been, the final levies over a year. So it just gives you an idea of the perspective. You can see in 2013, the levy increased 16%, and that was because of the pool referendum. We also like to compare where we stand with local government aid. This is money that comes from the state, and it's used to support municipalities across the state, and they use a very detailed formula to determine what kind of local government aid that we get, one of the biggest or a couple of the big factors are how many traffic accidents you have. We really don't want to be receiving, a local government aid for those particular reasons, but very often some cities have more, thoroughfares, you know, like, Lake City has Highway 61 going by. The odds are that they have more, so that might be a factor there. But another big determinant is pre-1940 housing stock. But you can see here we fall right in the middle of the pack. And these standings haven't changed much year by year. And the next two are tax bills. We like to show these as comparisons. Year to year, the county had a little trouble finding a residential. This is a residential property tax statement. They had trouble finding a residential homestead that was close to 100,000, 150,000. We kind of like to use that as our benchmark. But here is one where the value didn't change, and then as a result, the difference from 2017 to 2018, without any other changes in valuation, should be whatever it is we set as our preliminary levy. Well, this is an exceptional year. For this particular statement, it dropped from 280 and some to 278, and that would then show us that what also comes into play are increases in those estimated market values, meaning we probably added more properties to the tax rolls. If we hadn't had any kind of changes, then we'd see that it was a no change. But we have to work with this because very often at this particular meeting we have people come in and they're not happy with what their proposed taxes are, but very often an increase is related to the increased valuation of their property, not because the city necessarily increased their taxes. Okay. And then the same with an example for commercial. This one dropped a little bit as well too. But again, we like to benchmark with that. So I'll end, generally speaking, with the variables that can affect your taxes, and it's not just what the city council is doing in the way of a property tax levy. Can change with your market value change, like say if anything increased. And if you have any issues with your property tax valuations, you need to go to the open book meeting. The county conducts that, and that's usually in April. We don't have the date yet. It can also be affected by changes in property class rates, and that's usually at the state level. We haven't had some of those for a while. It could be affected by a loss of LGA. We all know that we had what's the word?
Reduction?
The disc something or other, way back with
yeah.
Ventura. No, it was Ventura? No, I don't even remember anymore, but we get our property taxes and our local government aid twice a year, and in December of that particular year, the state was facing some financial difficulties, unallotment. They decided not to even give us all of our LGA, and here we budgeted for it for the full year. So sometimes that can affect where we're at with that. And these other issues, we know the second one from the bottom, government programs, tax increment financing mandates. We know right now with the tax bill that our federal legislators are considering might impact us a lot, and we know it's going to impact you because for tax purposes, if they take away us being able to deduct our local real estate taxes, we're all impacted by that. That might not affect us directly, but it definitely is you. So, and then some general comments about the budget, because there's always an interest. On the levy side for personnel, the increase from 2017 to 2018 is 3.2%, and that's with the benefits that were budgeted. And then on the levy side, personnel costs as a total part of the budget for the levy purposes is 55.4%, and that's pretty normal, that it's about 60%. The city provides an awful lot of services. with respect to that. That's all I have. Like I say, I keep this one fairly short. If there's any questions for me, otherwise I'll turn it over to Mayor Return.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to C, public forum. Got 3 people here. When I call you, you can come on up. We got about 3-4 minutes apiece, and then if you just state your name and address, and then let us know what's on your mind. Is this Elaine Coulter?
I'm Elaine Coulter, 590 Gulf Links Lane, Longboat Key, Florida. And excuse me if I am repeating some questions that have been addressed in the past. I just got into town, I have a couple questions. Checking our assessments that are coming up, the only way I have to measure my property against other people's property is I go out and I pace it. My property in the frontage where the road's going by is 70 paces. Then we have Steve Johnson, who is 160 paces. And it shows that just because one side of the street is adjacent to the other side of the street, he's only going to get billed one. I don't understand why. He's got 2 streets going, and they're bigger than just my one street. And then we have the Durst, and they're 140 paces compared to my 70 paces, and they are paying the same as I am going to be billed. So in that case, we should have been billed twice as much as me. And then we have the school, and it looks like the school is coming up short about $20,000 of being billed what they should be billed. Am I correct in that?
We approved all this back in April, so what's said is said. We can't change anything now.
But obviously there's going to be a big difference. Who's going to end up paying for the differences? Especially in the school properties. It's all coming back to us, right?
Over the whole city.
Over the whole city.
Correct.
Is that fair?
Fair is irrelevant right now. I mean, it was all discussed at open meetings back in April, and we had public comment, and it was approved and done. So even if we wanted to change it today, we can't.
Okay. Well, it just doesn't look like there's a lot of discrepancy on how people are getting billed within the city. There is no understanding that or reasoning that I can see why some are being favored compared to others. And it isn't just the couple that I mentioned, there's several others too.
Right, so were you at the meeting at the school back in April when we?
No, I was still in Florida.
So we had these discussions for probably about 3.5 hours that night. We took 30, 40 different people, had public comment, and we took care of it at that meeting there. So I don't know what to tell you today.
Pay my bill and be quiet.
I didn't say that, but.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your comments.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Jerry Berg?
Jerry Berg, 506 Fifth Avenue Northwest, Castle. I didn't quite understand, well, I'm going to talk about it anyway, whether you take it off your agenda or not, but the tax assessments that you're talking about, we're talking about proposing tonight, the bills to be paid for the street project up in Northwest on Fifth Avenue where I live. In your packet, I have supposedly my proposed tax or assessment for my portion of the street project. It's on page 136, like 63 or something like that. You mentioned with Elaine there, we had a meeting last year about this project. It was stated then that everybody in the whole project, phase 1 and 2, would be billed in October for their portion of the assessments. There was quite a bit of discussion about people in phase 2, why should they have to pay a year ahead of time where the others didn't have to. I didn't get a bill in October, so I assumed maybe common sense played in and I wasn't going to be billed the next year. Well, in your packet, which you may or may not work on tonight, I don't know what you're going to do with it, but it shows I get a bill for $7.46. But it says I'm gonna be charged interest starting last October. I didn't get a bill to pay for it. How can you charge interest on something I'm not billed on?
I'm gonna have to turn this over to Nancy, because she takes care of all that.
The assessment notices, indicated that anyone who paid by November 15th of this year could.
What assessment
But
notice?
then it was November 15th on where the interest starts.
What assessment notice?
There was no notice.
The mailing that went out, I'm not sure I'm calling it by the right
Yeah, it
name.
would've
Nothing came to my door.
But it listed all of that information.
Last April, a letter went out to everybody.
Oh, that's for information purposes, yeah, and you said, and that was said 8,000, now it went down to 7,000, thankfully.
Should've been
There was
way
no
after
bill, there was
7.
no assessment, there was no nothing. This is what I got, look on, this was on the computer in the packet.
Yep.
That's not a bill, and I didn't get it before October. Why am I getting charged, will be getting charged interest from October?
I wasn't, I think,
I'm not so sure the Secretary of State wants to
with
do
the,
this.
with the hearing, all of that was set, is what I understood, and I was not, I'm not sure where.
If I'd have got a bill, you'd had a check by now.
I'm sorry?
If I had gotten that assessment bill, you would have had a check in your hand by now. Somebody would, I don't know about you, somebody would.
Somebody will.
I don't think,
I'll have to look into it, Gary.
it's fair to get paid,
Yep.
charged interest, and besides that, half a month's notice to pay for it. Fortunately, I kinda knew it was coming, so I budgeted for it, but a lot of people
Sure.
hanging out there
We'll
with
have to
2
look
weeks
into it,
pay.
and I'll get back to you. Somebody will get back to you from City Hall.
Take that into consideration when you
Yep.
act on this, or don't act on it,
Okay.
whatever you do tonight.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Did they send out bills?
Next, Jason Wilker.
My address is 308 10th Street, Byron, Minnesota. My address here in Dodge County, Catherine, is 1103 8th Avenue Northwest. I am trying to expand my business to grow, wanting to add on for a permit, or asking for a permit to add on to my building. I have some land out there. I own almost 5 acres out there. Both parcels out there are mine, both adjacent to each other, or whatever, connecting. I'm just asking for a permit so that I can add on to my building to get more of my equipment under cover and clean the property up and make it more presentable for the residents in the area and grow.
Okay. All right, and we've got something on the agenda later.
Yep, we'll bring it back.
Thanks, Jason, appreciate it. Okay, having no more, we'll move on to public hearing, which we don't have one. E, committee reports, number 1, Planning Commission, meeting 12/11/17. Anything to report there?
It will come up under new business as the variance discussion.
Okay, all right. And then number 2, the hacks, is that?
Actually, yeah, we can cover both of those.
Okay, all right. And then, number 2, park board minutes draft. Everybody saw the new life jacket policy for the pool. Anything else to add there, Doug? You're on that committee.
No, I think that's it.
Good, okay. All right. On to old business, resolution authorizing TAP grant application for the Safe Routes to School. So this was here, I was sick the last meeting, so this you guys discussed for a minute and thought you, right? You're right, okay, so we need to, for the Safe Routes to School, there's federal dollars available, my understanding is, possibly, and we have to do a grant application to see if we can get those federal dollars. Correct. This is a project for 2021 or 22. Okay.
But, excuse me, Mayor, before we move on, could we have a motion to adopt a policy on the life jacket policy?
Oh, you need a resolution on that? Or
A motion
a
on
motion?
that, and then also a motion on the next item, which I
hiring
Okay.
the basketball
So that wasn't information that was.
Yes, I'm
okay.
sorry.
All right.
We do need motion.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the life jacket policy as stated in your packet.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Doug. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion passes unanimously, Linda. Number 2, hire adult basketball league supervisor Arnaldo Menchaca. I'll entertain a motion to approve that hire.
Is this coming out of?
The park budget.
Park-
The
yeah, park
budget
board.
is part of the budget.
I'll make the motion.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Lonnie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. All right, resolution authorizing the TAP grant application for Safe Routes to School. This is something that needs to be done yesterday, if we're gonna do it, pretty much.
Due January 12th, so I have some
Okay.
work to do if we need to move forward. Can we just kinda go through, quickly, Mayor, what's before you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So what's before you is exactly that, it's a resolution to authorize myself to put together the application packet and bring it back to you as a council. What we discussed the last meeting, ultimately this failed, by a 2-2 vote, because ultimately we had, not a council consensus with the scope of the project, and in your Dropbox is a map showing what staff, city staff and the school board staff came up with, projects that we thought were the good projects to apply for, that we wanted to include in that scope of the project. And again, there was not consensus in the, before the council. So maybe the question for the council tonight, in my opinion, is, one, are we interested in proceeding with what we have planned for projects, in the scope of the grant application? Do we want to proceed with the application and provide a work group, potentially on the different sides of the discussion item, which was the bump outs at 16th Street and 5th Avenue? Or do we just wanna scrap the entire application at this time and not, spend any more time and effort, on the application? Give you a budget scope of the project, the application would be for $300,000 of MnDOT dollars and about $150,000 of a local match. What we discussed with the school board, and I don't think that they've formally committed their half of $150,000, but that's what the staff would ultimately be recommending, is a 50-50 split of the approximately $150,000 local match between the school board, and the city. So again, going back to maybe the scope, the bump outs, which is, I'll call it maybe a smaller part of the project, was the contentious item that there was not consensus. So going back to the bigger scope of if we proceed with the application or not, is how do we get by that issue, and how do we find consensus on the council side on what we wanna put in this application. What I don't wanna do is I don't wanna proceed with an application, bring it back before the council, and council not happy with what's proposed in there. So I'm just open conversation on how do we get to that point,
So, but if we approve the grant application to try to secure these MnDOT funds, and we're successful, we aren't saying in that grant application that if we, in that proposed bump outs, whatever the heck a bump out is, are in there, but we come back and we actually get to the rubber on, meets the road, we don't have to put the bump outs in. The whole, we're not approving the actual, every little piece that's in there, that's exactly what's gonna get done with that grant money. We're saying we wanna have safe routes to school, or are we saying we're gonna do exactly put those bump outs in?
Yes and no. This grant application is gonna be scored on how well and how much, benefit it brings to a safe routes to school program. It's gonna be scored against other projects, so the scope of the project is very important. And changing that scope after MnDOT says, here's your money to do the scope of your project, changing that gets to be a little bit of a gray area. So my recommendation to the council is, how do we get to the point that we have consensus on that intersection, that one item? So I would say,
I don't know if we're gonna get consensus
we
on
may
bump
not,
outs
so
at the
that's,
intersection.
that may be the case, but at the end of the day, my opinion is we need to put our best foot forward for what we want to include in the grant application. May we pull that scope of the project out and find, other items within the Safe Route to School plan to invest our public infrastructure dollars in, as opposed to these bump outs. But with that being said, I'm not sure the school support if we remove that portion of the project, because the Safe Route to School plan was developed by city staff, members of the community in the school, and this is one of the most important projects that the city staff and this group had. So what we're here to talk about.
But it can change, obviously, because if we do the grant application with exactly like you have in the packet, and we're successful, and then 2021 comes along, and the school says, nah, we aren't paying for any of it. The city says, well, if you're not paying half, we're not paying for any either, the whole project's done. We give them the $300,000 back. So we could also change an intersection at that same time too, couldn't we?
Fair enough, yep.
I mean,
That could
it's not
happen.
set in stone that if we get this first we have to be successful.
Yep.
For the assistance dollar coming in, and if we are, something's going to change that's on here 4 years from now. Because by then, hopefully, we'll have 16th paved all the way to the east going to the county road there, that's gonna change that whole intersection.
Yes.
Anyway, so, how flexible is it before we have you go through before we do this?
I think, I don't know what would change between now and then on the bump outs at 16th and 5th is my thought, and again, trying to put our best foot forward so we have a, you know, call it maybe an honest application on what we intend to build and how much value does MnDOT see, that portion of our project bringing into the Safe Routes to School program. Again, competitive, value to what we're going to propose, so.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
If 16th goes all the way to the county road, traffic is gonna increase immensely. I perceive 5th and 16th needing a traffic light sometime. And if you have a traffic light, why do you need the bump outs?
Could change the scope of the project, so, anyway.
Some kind of
Traffic light
limiter.
is out
I
there,
mean,
but-
even if you had a timed crosswalk, you know, where the kids can't just go, they have to stay until that crosswalk changes, you know, something to that effect, then it would eliminate the bump out. True?
Yeah, on that intersection on 16th, instead of the bump out on the north side, could you just square the corners up off of 5th? Which would widen the visibility and slow the traffic down without putting the bump out in, which would eliminate your extra. You still gotta have a little more manpower cleaning around the corners, cause it's gonna be square, but it's gonna slow the traffic down.
I mean,
And it's
you-
gonna give the kids that extra.
You're not gonna want a bump out on 16th,
No.
making that
You eliminate it.
We make that a through road, and now we got it way narrowed down there.
You don't wanna do that.
And
You're
the other thing is
bottlenecking.
the squaring of the corners, a lot of your traffic out there is buses.
Yes.
And now you got a big square corner, they're taking half of that, trying to get around the corner, you're making more
Yes.
of a congestion deal than it was. You know, just nothing nice about a bigger vehicle on a narrower road or a square corner. So,
This seems to be the big hang-up of this whole thing, right?
So, my understanding, the only hang-up on this whole
Okay.
thing, so,
Okay.
again, I'll go back to, do we remove it? Do we have a work group to work through it? Is there other areas that we wanna invest in, or do we scrap it because?
Because it's gonna change in 2 years.
well, Lonnie, you know, the traffic light might be needed before this ever
Before.
gets there anyway.
Yes.
And a traffic light or a crossing guard, I thought was a pretty important part of it anyway, I've heard from people that sit there and wait when kids
Yes.
come walking and one
Yeah.
behind the
Yes.
other, and it gets to be quite a long, drawn-out deal sometimes.
Either a timed crosswalk or traffic lights, one of the two. It would eliminate the need for the bump out.
To create the gaps in the kids so that
Yes,
vehicles can.
that's where the big thing is.
I drive through there every morning at 7:30, 7:45, waiting to bunch the kids up. It's unsafe, that anybody who drops their kid off on the north side of 16th and lets them cross the road is either lazy or irresponsible, because now you're letting them cross a busy street, go into the school and drop them off. I mean, I don't know, I would probably, I'm not a construction person, I'm not an engineer, I don't know about bump outs and all this, but it seems that's the only hang-up we have to go forward. I think we should at least, if there's money available that we can compete for,
Go for it.
it's gonna make the project viable, because if we don't get that, now we're gonna look at delaying much of the project, or all the project even further,
Yes.
And we're only gonna have more kids.
and.
Yes.
I mean, how
And more
big,
traffic.
you have to be very specific on that intersection, or can you just put, it'll be one of three things, a stoplight, timed crossing, or bump outs, the three, and then when the time comes, based on what the situation is, we can pick one of the three?
How about this, I'll do some more research, let's start maybe first and foremost, if the council's not scrapping this, and we're moving forward, it sounds like we are, I will look into how vague we need to be, look into some other options. We do have some times before it's due on January 12th, have some conversations from the school, and we can circle back and maybe have another conversation at the one council meeting we'll have before we actually need to approve the final application, to report back. But I didn't wanna continue investing time into something that the council wasn't interested in.
That sounds
So
fair.
maybe we'll-
Sounds fair.
they'll
Sounds-
report
I think
back.
everybody agrees we need to
Yes.
We gotta do
route the
something.
school, and
Yep.
that's our second busiest intersection at Cassidy.
Even
It's
if the
fifth
bump
and
outs
16th.
are yellow paint.
Yeah, so I mean, I think everybody here is in agreement that we want to safe route the school, we're just hung up on one.
Okay, so then before you is a resolution to authorize myself and staff to continue working on it with the intent to bring it back January 12th, and shore up the application, work with the school, get their, things in order on their side of things, and then bring back the application, and then I'll work on the scope of that intersection with the council kind of as we move forward.
I'll make a motion for that resolution.
I'll second it.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passed unanimous, Linda. Thank you, and thanks for your explanation and your patience. Number 2, old business, Compass 5x16 electric purchase agreement.
Yes, so, I believe we had Chris Koppel, came and did a presentation, and the council, in theory, agreed to, this new electric contract. And then based on the 11 of the 12 cities in Compass that, indicated interest in proceeding, they have gone ahead and, lined up this electric product on our behalf. So now I just need your formal approval of the agreement so that it can be signed and returned to Compass.
Okay, all right, that was in our packet, and that was the agreement that we talked about before. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the Compass 5x16 agreement that's in the packet.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Doug, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes. Thank you. All right, now, we're gonna have a quick closed session to discuss with our attorney and counsel regarding, union negotiation update. And we'll have everybody, we'll excuse everybody for a few minutes, we'll do the update in here, and then we'll open the doors back up and hand it back in. So appreciate your patience, just kinda break this up tonight a little bit, so, thank you.
Okay.
And then we get it.
Okay.
Yep, and then he would take a little break before.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay.